So I was hanging out with this guy I met when I was photographing a local movie over the summer. He was one of the actors. It was a horrendous movie, but altogether fun, and I was interested in photography. So what better way to get free networking and pictures under my belt? And we started hanging out outside of the movie. He was somewhat interesting. I was bored and had nothing else to do. Before I get further into the story, I will say that the guy was 25. I was 20. He was from a tiny town in Montana and brought up in a fundamentalist church, which he was pulling away from, so he had never had a girlfriend, etc. I knew immediately that I could have fun with the guy, but I could never seriously date him. I made that clear from the get-go because I knew that he liked me. He made that painfully obvious, but I had no intention of leading him on. We continued to hang out, though, with a group of people from the movie on a regular basis. After a month or so of this, he asked if I would be his girlfriend. I told him no. He accused me of leading him on. I told him if he thought that, we maybe shouldn't hang out anymore because I couldn't have made myself more clear. Well, that night he went out and got himself a DUI, emailed me later and told me he went to prison and blamed me for his stupidity. He also threatened me, told me that he would come stand out my door until I came out, and talked this all through with him, at which point I considered a restraining order. He was from Montana, so I didn't know, maybe he would bring a gun with him or something. I gave him a warning via email that I would take further action if he stepped on my property. Then I got a heartbroken email back, which went from insulting me left and right to telling me that one day I would see a movie he directed and I would know it was about me, because the lead character would be all these things like me, blah blah. He told me he wouldn't contact me again, and thus far that's held up. But wait, there's a kicker. About every month, I get a Facebook friend request from his now girlfriend. She followed me on Twitter. I had 2 accounts, and she followed both, and I'm the only legit person she follows. She basically only follows random pages and Twilight fan pages, and then me. So my stalker went from this guy to his girlfriend. I finally just blocked her on all social media after the 4th or so request. It really freaked me out. I went to high school with this really weird guy. We never interacted much in high school, but a couple of years later, after graduation, I ran into him in another city, a little far from our hometown. So we talked a bit, and he seemed to have become a bit more normal. He friended me on Facebook and would constantly message me. I started ignoring his messages. Then he somehow got a hold of my phone number. I still to this day have no idea how. He started texting me and calling me. I kept ignoring him. Meanwhile, weird things began happening around my house. We had several attempted break-ins, one of which was successful. These always happened when I was alone. I lived with my parents at the time. With the exception of the successful attempt, I wasn't home that night, but my mother heard him walking around. Nothing was stolen or vandalized. It was about that time that I learned from a friend that this creepy guy had just moved within a mile of my parents' house. He had just gotten out of some program for mentally unstable young adults and was living unsupervised for the first time. That was when I began to suspect him. One night, shortly after that, he sent me a text. It was an inappropriate image. I called my ex, who I'm still very close to, and told him the creeper's number. My ex then called him and made it very clear that it was in his best interest to leave me alone. Since that night, nothing else has happened. My stalker was a substitute teacher in high school. His eyes lit up when he first saw me. He became the substitute teacher in all my classes whenever teachers were out, which oddly enough started happening quite frequently. Somehow, he learned my schedule and started to meet me outside of my classroom. He would show up at practices and hide behind trees. He would show up at home and away games. He knew my birthday. I had independent study classes, and once he found me in my French class. I was sitting by a window in the 3rd floor classroom, and he asked me out on a date. He inched closer, waiting for my answer, so I said yes, fearing being pushed out of the window. I started telling my friends, who started to witness his strange behavior. Finally, on my birthday, a Friday, it was raining, and I was pulling out of my parking spot to take my friend home. Dude appears out of nowhere, walks around my car twice, and knocks on my window and states, "You're a brat. You're nothing but a rich, spoiled brat. You don't even deserve this car." My friend told me that then and there, on Monday morning, he would tell the principal if I didn't. I was terrified. I would have been blamed. My parents were going to think it was my fault. All weekend I was terrified. Finally, Monday morning comes and I'm shaken. Over the loudspeaker, as the day's events were being announced, a voice mentioned that the substitute teacher would not be back, as he had a heart attack in church and died right there the day before.